Okay, let's get started. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I edited this photo. As you see, this is the finished version of it. And if we look down here, we can see that I have my three exposures. This is my normal exposure, this is my underexposed shot, and this is my overexposed shot. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these three shots and we're going to merge them in Photoshop in the Merge to HDR feature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all three of these and I'm going to simply go up to Photo, Edit In, and you'll notice down here we have the Merge to HDR Pro in Photoshop. So I'm going to choose that. And what that's going to do is open up Photoshop, and it's going to merge these three photos together so that we have the full dynamic range of the image. So you can see now Photoshop is processing these three photos, and you're going to see over here in the layers palette that it brings it up in 3 layers. And still working, still working. What it will do is, now these are all camera raw shots, so what it's going to do is it's going to open it up in the camera raw interface, and once it does, we will process it. Okay, so it's going through that process right now. Okay, so now it's opened up the photo, all three photos actually. It's opened up all three photos now in the camera raw interface. And what we see up here is a 32-bit image. What we're going to do is click Remove Ghosts, because ghosts are anything that's moved in the photo from the time you've taken these three images. So you know, if the wind's blowing and the trees are moving, what you're going to get are, you know, kind of a ghosted effect when Photoshop puts these three photos together. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose one of these frames as the actual frame that it's going to take and use for our HDR merge. So I click Remove Photos, and I'm just going to click OK. And what it's doing now is it's merging the three photos into an HDR image. Okay, so what we see here now is an image of the three exposed shots. This is all merged together now as an HDR image, and if you look closely, it doesn't look that great. When you merge to HDR Pro, what you get is a layered image, but it needs to be processed, and it needs to be processed in Lightroom for all the magic to happen. So now that we have our merged image, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move Photoshop off to the side, because what I want to show you is when I save this image in Photoshop, it's going to save it right back to Lightroom. Okay, so now that we have our image in Photoshop, I'm just going to do a quick Command S, and if you look down here in Photoshop, you'll see that it's saving. Okay, and then when you look over here in the Lightroom interface, you'll see right here that the image saved from Photoshop into Lightroom. Okay, so here is our Lightroom image. Okay, I'm going to click on that. And this is the HDR that came from Photoshop. So basically what this is these three photos here that are merged together. Okay, so I can actually go back to this the finished version of this photo and show you exactly what I did, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do this from scratch, because I always like to do something different every time. So okay, so we have our image here, And there's a lot of things that we need to do with this photo to really bring out a lot of the tone. So usually the first thing that I do is I crop it. And I'm looking at this photo and I'm saying, well, do we need everything in this photo? And I think what I did was I cropped it a little bit. So I'm going to go to my crop tool here. And I'm going to simply bring in and crop this area and make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to move this up. And I'm going to take about, this much area here. So something like this. This might not be exactly what I did, but something like that. And I'll hit my return key and crop that image. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is, what I usually start with is bringing in, taking my highlights and sliding that all the way to the left. Now when I do that, you can see that all that highlight information starts appearing in the sky mostly. And I'm going to take my shadow detail and I'm going to move that off to the right a little bit, not all the way, but what that's doing is that's pulling out all the shadow detail inside of these dark areas. Okay, then by holding down the Option key and clicking on the white slider, I'm going to click, the screen goes black, and I'm going to move it to the right until I see the first bit of light come out. Okay, and I'm going to stop right there because any other areas of white will be blown out areas, so I want to prevent that. And then I'm going to hold the Option key down again, and this time I'm going to grab the black slider and I'm going to move that this time to the left. I'm going to go a little bit further than you do with the white slider. I'm going to let that go, and you can see that that's brought out a lot of the the dark areas. It's darkened up a lot of those dark areas, and by pressing my backslash key I could see before and after. Okay, that is before and that is after. So that little move right there with moving your highlights and moving your shadows to the right really brings out a lot of the tone. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take my clarity slider and maybe move my clarity up just a little bit. That's going to increase the detail in the mid-tone areas. And then I'm going to pump up the vibrance a little bit. And usually what that does when you up your clarity, it starts to kind of oversaturate usually the oranges. And so I think what I did in that example was I think I brought the luminance down in some of the oranges. So I'm going to take the luminance slider and I'm going to move that a little bit down. Well, this is actually the luminance, not the saturation. And I'm going to take the yellows and I'm going to move that down a little bit. Okay, this is all kind of seasoning to taste. Okay, now I'm going to go down to my blues, and I want to blue up the sky a little bit more, so I'm going to take the luminance of my blues and move that down to the left, and you can notice that the blues get a little bit darker in the sky here. Okay, so again, I'll do my before and after. Notice how in my before I see no blue here, and in the after version I see lots of blue, and it just really punches up this photo a lot. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slide down to sharpening, and I'm going to take my sharpening slider, and I'm usually going to put my sharpening up to about 70. Okay, this is a formula that I've learned from a fellow online. Then I'm going to take the luminance slider, and I'm going to the noise reduction luminance slider. I'm going to move that up to 30. Okay, 70 plus 30 equals 100. And that's about what you're trying to aim at. So if you're sharpening 50%, you might want to increase your luminance 50%. 70% sharpening, 30% luminance. Okay, now another thing is that when we sharpen all the noise in the photo. And there's a lot of areas that we don't want to sharpen noise, for instance, such as the sky. So if I hold the Option key down and I click on the masking slider, in the sharpening section here, click and hold, I'll see that the photo goes white, and as I move the slider to the right, you'll see that the areas that are going to be sharpened are all the white areas, and the areas that sharpening will not apply to will be the black areas. Okay, so I'll move that to the right because we don't want sharpening in the clouds. Okay, now I know it's hard to see at this point what had happened, but basically we've sharpened just the areas that we wanted to sharpen and not the other areas. Okay, and lastly what I want to do is I want to create a little bit more definition in the clouds up here. It looks a little plain right now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my adjustment brush. I'm going to go on my adjustment brush and I'm going to paint over the clouds here. So I'm going to hit my letter O key so that you can see where I'm painting. Okay, and it's just showing you a little bit of where I'm painting. So I'm painting with a brush. Okay, and I'm going to toggle off my O key to take away that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to up my contrast a little bit so that I could start seeing a little bit more definition in the clouds here. So I'm going to up my contrast. I'm going to bring my highlights back a little bit so I can see a little bit more highlights in the clouds. I'm going to up my clarity a little bit. Okay. And now I could start seeing a little bit of tone that's happening in this cloud, a little bit more kind of definition. And I might even take my exposure and drop that just a bit so I can see a little more, even more definition right here. Okay, so if we look at this, what we've done is this is before and this is after. Okay, before and after. Now it looks like I've gotten a little bit here in the blue, so I'm going to hold my Option key down with my brush, and I'm going to kind of unbrush some of this away here so it's not so bright in the sky. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the edit. Again, we'll go to before. This was my normal shot, or the merged HDR versions of the shot, and then what I've done in post-processing in Lightroom. So you can see quite a big difference. It does bring out a little bit more of the scene the way I saw it. I've enhanced it quite a bit, but hey, that's what Lightroom is all about. Right? Hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you on the next one.